Hello, I today am going to give a short demo on the IBM Storage Protect Plus Online Services Web API. I'm going to give a short walkthrough on how you would use the API in a Visual Studio application that you would develop yourself as a user and do a little Hello World program for that. So to start off, and this is the link in the IBM Docs where you would start off. The very first bullet here is the download SDK. If I click on that, it takes you to the package here that you can download, the NuGet package. The important things to remember here is that it requires 4.1 or higher. I believe you get that with Visual Studio 2022, which we'll all be using today. It also requires a Net Framework 4.7.1, which also comes with that version of Visual Studio. And it also requires some dependent packages I'll go over as I load the packages into Visual Studio. So all the information you need here on how to load the package into Visual Studio is also described. You can use the package manager, you can use NetCLI, you can create a reference example. Here's a frameworks that I talked about that are required. Net Framework 4.7.2 actually was required, and .NET at least 5.0 or higher, which is also required. And then the dependency should be Newtonsoft 11.02, which is the runtime Newtonsoft library that's required. So let me go ahead and go back to the SDK documentation. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the functions here that are provided. So I'm going to focus on the account login and get credential profile methods, which are what I'll have in my Visual Studio environment. And then there's very good examples on how to use the API here documented. If I click on account login, I can see that it basically gives me the code I need to do that with username and password, and the object type that's required as an input is listed here. And then same with the get credential profiles. I get the requirement is that I log in, create a login object, which is context, and then call the get credential profiles API call, and it returns back an object, and these are the items that are in that object. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a Visual Studio environment for this. So I'm just going to use a new project, and we'll just use a normal console app, and we'll just name it SPPOS Demo 1. I have a directory that I'm saving that in. In my environment, I have .NET 6, so 5 or higher is required. We're good there. Okay, so here goes my opening default console app application that Visual Studio is going to give me. First thing I want to do is I want to add SPPOS package. So standard, add use the package manager. You can just use the NuGet package manager, and we're going to do that now. There's also the other options that were explained on the web page. And you can search for SPPOS. There it is. Version 0.0.1 is the current version. I want to add this to my project. So currently shows it's not installed. So now I want to install the latest stable, which is 0.0.1. So go ahead and hit the install button. And it's now installing that. IBM SPPOS SDK also requires Newtonsoft. So I'm going to go ahead and load Newtonsoft as well. It's not already in there. And for the SDK, we require 12.01. So make sure you change your version here. Okay, so now I have both the IBM POS SDK and Newtonsoft packages loaded into my project. So now I'll go back to my Hello World program, and we'll just say, and what I'll do is I'll go back to the SDK documentation, and I'm going to go to use the account login API call, and I'm just going to copy this right out of here. I'm going to paste this right into my Visual Studio Smart, and there's a package I'm using, so it added the correct using statement for me. So you'll need this in your code in order to utilize the packages. And I am also going to use the get credential profiles. In this example, it's giving us here the first call you need to make is the login with your username and password to get the context object. And the context object is able to get the profile from that. So I already have this one in there. So now I'm going to cut and paste this one. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to change your username and password here with your SPP online services credentials that you used to log in. And once you do that, if you were to save this, you can run this code. I have a small example of what it looks like when this runs. If I were to run that demo code, it would look something like this. So of course, there is my login command. The login was done. And then we went ahead and got the credential profile. If I iterate through the items in the credential profile, there's a type, or there's an ID, there's a name, there's a token type, and then there's an application type. And I went ahead and just printed those out here. And you can see those if I go back to the API documentation in the get credential profile, you can see that the object that it returns contains an ID, name, a type, and a app profile type. So that is the end of the intro discussion on how to use the Spectre Protect Plus online services SDK in a Visual Studio environment to create a .NET application. You can create your library, or in this case, I did a console app. And then with that .NET application, you're able to use any of the API methods or describing documentation. Thank you very much. Be sure to check out the other videos on Spectre Protect Plus online services.